Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the day one of Women Trailblazers. Those who have been following us are aware Women Trailblazer is an event curated by ETHRWorld to celebrate Women's Day through a week-long activities comprising podcasts, roundtables, keynotes, and dialogues. I'm Puja Bothra, Senior Content Lead, ETHRWorld, and your host for this session. Today, we have gathered to discuss an up to date approach towards bridging the gender divide through digital learning. For both men and women to have equal opportunity to harness the potential of digital transformation is critical to a sustainable growth of an economy and the country. However, women are still lagging behind in the use and affordability of digital tools. They also face culture barriers and stereotypes that prevent them from using digital means of learning and staying connected in the world. To that point, I would now like to call the eminent speakers to share their insights on reforming cultural norms and tackling stereotypes to bridge the gender divide through digital learning. We are extremely fortunate to have with us representatives from the learning industry, educational institute, and the corporate world. Dear viewers, please join me in welcoming Dr. Betty Vandenbosch. Betty is a Chief Content Officer at Coursera. She oversees the company's content, credential strategy, and partner relationships. It is absolutely wonderful to have Betty in this session.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to explore these issues and concepts together. There's so much to do, and there's so much we've already accomplished.
Absolutely. Next, we have Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Pro Chancellor, Symbiosis International University, and Principal Director, Symbiosis College of Arts and Commerce. Great to have you, Dr. Vidya, in this session.
Thank you very much. I would like to be introduced as Pro Chancellor. Commerce College is one of the colleges that we have.
Yes, indeed. We also have a representative from the human resource industry, Megha Gupta. Megha is a director HR at Fiserv. Fiserv is an American fintech company. Megha has been holistically leading HR over 15 years now.
So hi everyone, and pleasure is all mine to talk and interact about this topic. So absolutely looking forward.
So let's start with you, Megha. Megha, it'll be great if you share an overview of the global learning trends and how they differ on demographic basis.
Sure. So I think, first of all, let me, broaden the horizon by saying, the topic that we are today, especially when it comes to gender, especially when it comes to the education. And, surprisingly, today in the morning, I shared something on the LinkedIn, which is very, very similar around learning how, gender, is lagging behind when it comes to education. In fact, if I put a quick stats around for this group, specifically in the STEM roles, which is your science, technology, engineering, mathematics, across the globe, before even coming to the demographic and the geographic division, in STEM roles across the globe, there are only 25% of women representation, across the globe, which is like a big deal if we have to think about it. Yeah, and that itself shows that as a woman, how much focus do we put even at before they enter the corporate jobs? How much focus is there when it comes to educations towards the STEM roles? How much is it really cultural? Like in India, we do know that a lot of time men get preference, in their childhood towards picking up a science or a mathematics or an engineering kind of a stream, vis-a-vis women, given more preference towards arts or a commerce kind of a profile. Now, when we're talking about education, we also have to think that, you can't solve when you suddenly become 25 and 30 years of age and you expect corporates and everybody to solve for it. I think it comes to go back to culturally, how do we have to solve and think about, as geographies, as nations, are we really, opening up the horizon, the mindset about the education in multiple fields, then really, thinking after 30 years, suddenly the world will change and open up multiple horizon when it comes to education. The second piece that I do want to talk about, while we talk about multiple education in multiple countries, we also need to understand that, women, after a certain level in their career, especially after the middle management, you will see a huge drop into the percentage of either people hitting the glass ceiling, or, really thinking about people who actually get promoted internally within the organization. And this is not a new stats that I'm putting out. We all know this, how many people in the C-suite position are there in the corporate world today as women. Now that also brings us a reflection to say, are corporates putting enough efforts to educate, that layer at the middle management, how they bring in more leadership qualities? And second also goes back to the entire culture, because Puja, you spoke about, culture as being one of the wider topic today. Are we also thinking the broader culture of the organization and solving? Because, it's very easy for, men to, rise the horizon, but, culturally, do we solve that? How many times that we exclusively put our focus to say, oh no, I want a woman leader into this position, or this is a sales job, but I firmly believe it is irrespective of gender who can perform this role. Or it is a night shift, we probably work into US time zones a lot more. Can we really think about, everybody can do that today? But I think those are very, very cultural nuances that we need to start thinking and bringing, specifically when we talk about education, how much focus we bring in towards multiple aspects of education that we put in across the, world. While we talk in detail, Puja, but I thought, we'll absolutely first, set the context from a high level, bird's eye view.
Yes, indeed, Megha, and absolutely agree with you on the 2 points that you specifically made. One, the diversity number is still low as far as STEM subjects are concerned. Number two, at the top, women are elusive, and that remains a constant and consistent problem which we've not been able to tackle since years. Dr. Vidya, what do you share, with respect to global learning trends and the demographic differences, especially the gender difference?
Yeah, so I agree to some points of Megha, not all, because things are changing now. I would, propose that there is an urban and rural divide. So when you see in urban areas, you see more amount of digital literacy, and I think the topic for today is more about digital literacy amongst men and women and the gender divide. So in urban areas, you do see a lot of digital literacy, much more than what you see in the rural areas. Because rural areas, there are a couple of problems. One, of course, of connectivity. So as such, in India, when you go to rural areas, you wouldn't see as much of digital literacy simply because the bandwidth or the network is not available. But even if it is, and say, for example, for the last 2 years, where all of us through our universities and colleges taught all students online. So if you, for example, we have a school in one of the rural areas close to Kolhapur, which is in Maharashtra. And there, you have men and women, which means you have boys and girls in that school. So it was so difficult for us to teach online, because of the bandwidth and network problems. But more important, it was far more difficult to teach girls than boys, because if families had one smartphone, that would the preference would be to a boy, giving that phone to a boy than a girl. So I think that kind of divide, which is so very prevalent in the rural areas, you don't see it as much in urban areas. Secondly, in urban areas, again, the education quotient as such is much higher than what it is in the rural areas. And therefore, I think even girls want to stand up and do things as what, you're equal to boys. So there's really not much of divide unless, in families where there is a cultural issue of not educating women or not educating girls. But while they get educated and grow up and also join the corporate world, I agree with Megha that at leadership positions or in the middle management level, most of the times they have to take a break because of family. And still in India, culturally, the families are taken care of, which means the children, the in-laws are taken care of by the women, by the lady in the family. And therefore, most of the times women have to take a break, a total break from what they were doing in the past in their careers, or at least take a temporary break to again start their second careers. So that is something that we see in India. Again, developed and developing countries, the picture is again totally different. I think as what we see in India would be the same position in Africa and other developing countries, whereas it probably wouldn't be, and Betty would throw more light on this. It wouldn't be the same picture in developed countries. So I think it's more circumstantial. But what you see nowadays, and the positive part of it, is that most young men and women across their status, across their geographies, across boundaries, want to come up, want to be digitally educated. And I think it is important for us as educational institutions, as universities and colleges, to mitigate this problem and to provide as much of digital literacy, to all, irrespective of gender. And what we have done, and I'll just end by this, what we have done is that because of this rural and urban divide, even in rural areas very close to Pune city, you see this divide. And therefore, what we've done is we've created a mobile digital literacy lab, which goes into these villages, and our own students of computer science or management teach young men and women, young boys and girls, and primarily girls. So our endeavor is to educate at least one girl in one family in these 23 villages that we've adopted, so that she becomes digitally literate.
Thanks, Vidya, for sharing those points. And, the divide in India stands due to multiple reasons. Definitely, the urban and rural divide is there. Then we have divide, which is because of culture, affordability, and, you've given us examples of all these points. Betty, you are here to share the global perspective. And already audience questions have started pouring in. Do you see, a difference in learning trends as far as men and women are concerned globally?
So, I'm very encouraged. And maybe I shouldn't be, but I've been in STEM my entire career. And when I started, it was very lonely. I had no female professors when I was in school. My first job, there were only 2 women in our whole department, and on and on and on. And today at Coursera, we have an executive staff of 10, and 5 of us are women and 5 are men. Now, that might be a little bit of accident, but not completely. And I think that the world is changing and people are moving forward. When I look at the statistics, the pandemic was much harder on women than men. Women lost their jobs across the globe at a greater rate than men. But women on Coursera are online at a higher rate than pre-pandemic. 50% of new registered learners on Coursera in 2021 were women. And before the pandemic, it was only 45% of learners. So I think for the horror of the pandemic, what has happened is it has given women opportunities. Many people across the globe have lost their jobs, and women particularly have been in fields that were pushed down through the pandemic. They also have tended to be in careers that are at risk with digitization. And what's happening is they're learning. Women across the globe are learning digital skills at a higher rate than they were previously, partly because they can learn online. And Dr. Vidya, you're absolutely right. It's hard if you don't have any technology. But if you can do a low data download, you can learn on your own time. You can learn in 10-minute chunks. You can get back to it when the children are asleep or when the food is on the stove. And that's the reality for many, many women. The other thing that is helping women tremendously is that people have gotten much more accustomed to remote work. And remote work in digital fields is now the norm in many parts of the world. And when you can work remotely, it's much easier for women to balance work and family. So there are bright lights. Now, in terms of the statistics, we find that emerging economies are seeing a much more dramatic increase in online education participation among women year over year. We found that a 7-fold increase in the women learning in the Philippines, 729% increase in Lebanon. In India, back in 2016, there were 39,000 women on the Coursera platform. And today, there are more than 5.7 million. So things are changing, things are getting better. In terms of what is happening in industry, that has to come along. There's no question. Women have to be given opportunities. And it seems to me that if they can work remotely, the challenges of managing families and homes and parents are lessened because they've got more flexibility.
Indeed, work from home and digitalization has really given, men, women a lot of flexibility to learn when they want, how they want, to take bite-sized content, to do long courses. So, it has empowered men and women likewise, but it has also helped women to create a equal learning field and field as far as second careers are concerned, as far as new job opportunities are concerned. Betty, I'd like to take an audience question here. So Deepika is asking that Megha mentioned that, there are fewer women in senior roles. At the C-suite, the number of women are less. Is it same in United States? I know you gave an example of Coursera, but is it same elsewhere? What would you say?
So, yes, and there's hope. There's no question. When you look at the Fortune 500, and there are many more men across the globe working in senior roles than women. And part of that is the reality of child rearing and so forth. Women step out, they step back in, and it's very difficult to catch up. I think that's getting better. And I think that over time, it will continue to get better. And my personal experience, of course, was when I started working, there were no women, and now there are some. One thing that I'm very excited about is that there are more women leading universities and leading deanships, leading business schools, engineering schools than there ever have been before. Now, why am I so excited about that? Because women particularly look to role models. On Coursera, when women teach courses, many more women attend those courses and complete them. So now that we have more women in leadership roles in institutions, more women will follow. And that will then translate to more women across industry as well. And it's an excruciatingly slow process, excruciatingly slow. And yet, if we all believe that it's important, and the statistics are clear, that companies that have men and women in leadership roles do much better than companies that have just men, and that women bring a perspective to leadership and to management that is very good for companies. So as more women take this on and see that they're not alone, there's going to be spreading activation, and more will lead to more will lead to more. What we all need to do is speed it up. Make sure that there are women role models. Make sure that women see that they can, and give them, as I said previously, opportunities to do things at the time that fits with their lives. women will always have children, and it's up to us as society to make sure that having children does not preclude them from other things as well.
Interesting. Vidya, I'd like to ask you, where do we stand as a nation with respect to skilling and empowering women? What are some of the areas where work still needs to be done, which are barriers to skilling and empowering women?
Yeah, so I agree with Betty that these 2 years have seen definite growth in women, in education, I would say, and online education specifically. And thanks to Coursera and many other tech companies, where it has been much easier for women to actually get access to learning, and they provided this access. So I really appreciate their work. The second is as regards skilling. There are women. Again, I'm going to rural areas where they have these self-help groups. That need to be empowered through educational programs, and we are trying our level best as universities, not just Symbiosis, but in most universities, to help these self-help groups and empower them with the requisite knowledge. Because for example, many self-help groups try and start some businesses with not much of knowledge, really the requisite knowledge that is required for them. Let's take an example of a self-help group in one of the villages that we work. They used to make Indian spices. Most women can make spices at home, but they didn't know the art of packaging. They didn't know the art of marketing and the whole supply chain. Now, when universities get linked up with such self-help groups, and we add this to our service learning component, in our academic structure, so that students get actually associated with these, then a lot of skilling can be done for such self-help groups or such groups of women, where we can actually provide them with the requisite knowledge, so as to take them through the whole trail of the whole business cycle, so that they're more productive. They get better rates for whatever their produce is, and so on and so forth. The second is women empowerment. So what we have also done is, in the incubator that we have, and I'm just giving you examples of our university, I'm sure many other universities in India are doing this. So we have the technology business incubator supported by the government of India, the Department of Science and Technology, and it does incubate campus startups. Now we have a separate vertical for women startups, as we've collaborated with Niti Aayog, the India's Planning Commission, for Betty. And so, because they are doing a lot of work, the Indian government and specifically Niti Aayog is doing a lot of work in women empowerment with the Women Empowerment Program. Now, because of this collaboration, we can actually spread this message far and wide. And therefore, again, we see a lot of connections of these these startups of women in the neighborhood villages that have been associated with this vertical of women empowerment, or the women incubators. And we call it Women Empowerment Wing, WEW, and where we attach them to management students. And these management students actually help them not just set up that company, but even empower them with the knowledge. So in a way, it is skilling them, right? As regards other disciplines, I mean, Megha spoke about STEM disciplines. So I'll just give you an example of medicine. I'm a medical doctor by training. And let me tell you that there are almost 50 to 60% girls or women who enter the medical education. Okay, so they get trained. But many of them don't continue or don't pursue their profession. So the statistics says it's about just 17% women, at least in allopathy, who practice medicine. You cannot imagine 50% join in the medical education, medical colleges, but God knows what happens, after, because of the lengthy post-graduation, because of family problems, whatever could be the reasons, but they don't. So we've set up a exclusive Symbiosis Medical College for women, so that 100% are girls. So, we empower them and, get them connected with community, give them all these other non-medical, education, so that they continue with the hope that they continue in the medical profession. Now, there has to also be a cultural change in the society, Puja. It's not just about we skilling women, we empowering them, we educating them in different disciplines. But I think the society needs to change. the culture of our society needs to change to accept that women are equal to men. And as I think Megha said, that there are certain professions that simply cannot accept women, because if an IT industry is working for a US client, they would probably not hire women simply because they believe that women will not be able to do night shifts because of family problems. Now, many such cultural nuances in societies, not just in India, but I'm sure across the world, and Betty, you would probably be having the same there. I mean, I've read books where people have written about top companies in the US which don't support women as much as what probably the support to women comes in some of the companies in developing countries. So, things can just differ in different cultures, but culturally, the society has to accept that women also can be equal to men, and women can also do things equal to what men can do. And I think this cultural change has to happen. And I'm sure we do see a change, and we do see and hope that the 21st century, all of us believe, is going to be a century of women. And we see a lot of women leaders than before in the corporate world. But I'm sure there is a long way to go.
Thanks, Vidya, for sharing that perspective and leaving us with such a hopeful note. I totally agree. And, it is very interesting to know that how institutes like Symbiosis are working with, grassroots level people at grassroots, as well as you have a medical college exclusively for women. Very, very interesting to know that. Megha, I'd like to ask you two things. One is that, definitely women take breaks in their career, to family and other, family oriented needs that they have. You being in corporate since years, is there any special initiatives you've done in your current organization or previous organization? Has policies become more pro women to welcome women back, after their career breaks? And secondly, with respect to skilling and empowering women, do you have something special in your organization over and above, whatever L&D programs that you run?
Great question. So, Pooja, I would, absolutely say, I think the world has become a lot more aware than what it was. I'm not saying that, whatever corporates are doing are enough today, but, like in pandemic, the gender parity ratio, which was predicted to achieve at 95 years, due to pandemic, it has gone up by 235 years, which means almost a decade has been increased to ever be able to achieve the gender parity. Now that's a reality, but the another fact is gender diversity inclusion has become one of the most biggest priority across every single organization today, and we all know the benefits. We all understand that organizations are now more sensitive about this. There is a top management who's always thinking about, or a shareholder as well, tracking what's my diversity percentage, how am I doing on my diversity inclusion agenda, which is a great sign of where we are as an industry. Which means in my last 10 years, I'll not even say my last two organizations, I'll rather say my last 10 years in the corporate, I have seen a huge movement when it comes to accepting the fact that oh, women do take break, and it is okay for them to hire back even at a senior management role. Junior roles, I think organizations were always open, but even at senior level roles, even in technology, where women take a break of 3 years or 5 years, like I have a very close a friend of mine from my MBA who chose a technical field of HR, which means she designs SAP and couple of those technical pieces for the clients. She took 6 years of break for her first kid, and she's back today, in working again into a very good IT organization doing technology. I think I've seen multiple initiatives right from my current organization to last 10 years, that I've seen right from many campaigns that organization run for hiring exclusively women who've taken a break, to even run a campaign of within the organization if women have left out because of any reason, relocation, calling them back and say, hey, would you be interested to join us back? It's been 3 years, what's your thing? And with obviously pandemic, and I always say pandemic also brings in a silver lining, which means with this hybrid, which is this remote working workspace, that's another era to start to say, can we have if us shifts or night shift are not a possible, now organizations need to start thinking of, can we get more women? Because now you can just give them remote working, or if it is a late night shift, come to us in the office, rest of the shift do it from home, which also opens up culturally. See, yesterday, their parents or their in-laws were saying, oh, I don't want you to go out and work. But today, if it is a hybrid and a remote, the more acceptability that will come into the culture and the society. I think it's the right time for organization to also tap that market to whatever they were doing. I think they were doing, but now it's a time to also open up the floodgates to say we can do a lot more to bring in that diverse folk within the organization. So that's the first part. The second part, Puja, that you specifically asked on, what are the interventions that organization run beyond the learning and development for ensuring that women do arrive at a leadership role within the organization. So I think the one, of course, there is a structured program which is not diverse, which is more for everybody that you run in the organization. But if I have to talk about couple of structured intervention that typical organization do, right from specifically doing a high potential program which is only focused on women at a manager, at a senior manager, at a director, or even at a VP level, to say, hey, we are exclusively focused on you, because we do understand that we need to potentially provide you a lot more leadership skills and training, because we do understand that as an organization we have a focus intervention towards that, which means designing an exclusive curriculum for women leaders to enable them to grow a lot higher into their senior trajectory. The second piece that I would call out, which is more softer in nature, which would be around, do you provide a peer mentoring circle for them, which is a safe zone to talk about their challenges, to talk about simple things like, if a woman has returned back from their maternity or a break, do you provide that support, which is not your people manager, which is not your leadership, but somebody within the organization as a woman who's gone through that, which who can talk through what challenges that you face when you come back or join back from a maternity or from a break, or even saying, hey, today I've just become a people manager and I don't know how to deal with a man who has more experience than me. Do you have that formal circles to be able to reach out within the women leadership in the organization to help them and give them those nuggets, which are more life experiences, wherein you don't have a fear of judging when I ask even a silly question to say, hey, how do you pass on a difficult message? I think it's very important to train women leaders, or future women leaders, on these softer aspects which organizations to start building as a culture, rather than just thinking that, okay, you've grown to this level, let's go to a program where everybody goes, but a focus intervention towards that.
Thank you, Megha, for sharing those points. With what you said, as well as what Vidya said, culture is a very, very important, element here. And I feel when we're skilling women, when we're empowering women, it helps to sow the seed for culture change, because in most cases, it is women who act as barriers for other women. Historically, we've seen and how does that change? That will change only if women become more aware to the needs that there should be independence and equality in the society. Betty, I'll take another audience question here, and Nageshwar is asking, what is the percentage of gender divide at digital platforms as on date, if you have those numbers?
I can tell you some statistics. I can talk about the world, and I can also talk a little bit about India. As I said a little bit earlier, half of new registered learners on Coursera in 2021 were women, which was up from 45% before the pandemic. Another thing that I think is interesting and really, really important is that STEM enrollments grew even faster. Across the globe, they were 31% in 2019, and now 37% of all of Coursera's enrollments in 2021 are women. The one that I think is possibly the most exciting is entry-level professional certificates. And here I'm going to go to India. In India, we have entry-level certificates. Now, let me explain a little bit about what these are, and then I'll tell you why I'm so excited about the numbers. Entry-level certificates are certificates where you study for 3 to 6 months, typically, and then you have the skills to take on a new role. And that role is a digital role. So you could work as an IT help desk person. You can work in user experience. You can work in project management, in cybersecurity, data analysis, those kinds of roles. On our platform, we have many certificates that without any previous experience in that field, particularly in 6 months, you've developed the skills for an entry-level position. Now, why that's so important is the challenges that women face are not just, getting into the workforce and so forth, but getting into the STEM workforce, even if their previous education and previous experience wasn't STEM. And in India, the enrollment in professional certificates went from 22% in 19 to 30% in 2021. The other thing that gives me great hope is that women are using mobile much more than men in India. 62% of Indian women are using mobile in order to learn versus only 48% globally. So what's happening is women understand what the challenge is. They figured it out and they're moving forward. What I encourage companies to do is to educate not just women, but also men, because leadership is something that men and women need to do together. And when we talk about cultural change, you can't just hammer your fist on the table and say, you will change, because that's not culture. Culture is the consequence of behaviors, action, and learning. And if companies are committed to helping everyone raise women, because we need more women, there are not enough women in business today, then that requires education for not just women, but also for men. So I highly encourage companies to mentor, to provide opportunity, but also to provide education that helps people see the value of different voices in every room, whether it's a boardroom, a leadership room, or a front line. That's going to help. So when people see successful women, when they are taught by successful women, and when people learn about successful women and the importance of diversity in the workplace, then things will change. Then things will get better. And again, this sounds like, oh, you got to do this, you got to. It's happening. It's just happening too slowly. We've got to speed up.
Vidya, your thoughts over the years, do you think, the corporates have changed? What kind of placements do you see for women? And, is there a remarkable improvement there?
So you're asking me about placements?
Yes. Roles and jobs and opportunities for women in the corporate world.
Yeah, so I don't think really there has been any gender difference between the offer of jobs, at least on campus, because Symbiosis Business Schools being ranked among some of the top B schools in the country. I really don't think there is any kind of divide. But let me tell you an interesting survey that we did. So we recently did a survey on just women in higher education, because Pune as a city has several higher education institutions. And while the 2 years when people were working from home, we did this survey on work from home of women, and interesting questions that we posed. And interesting the data that we got and the inferences were so interesting that women, as what we spoke, that women probably found it much easier to work from home because they could take care of the families and so on and so forth. This is exactly what I thought, but the findings of the survey are so different. Women don't want to work from home for several reasons, and they would rather want to come to office and work, because many of them said that, say if there's a husband and wife both working from home, and that's exactly what happened in the last 2 years, families needed women to take care of other things, of domestic things, and they told the women to do so and not the men. So if you have a husband and wife sitting on their laptops in probably two different rooms, and if maybe tea has to be made for the mother-in-law, it would be, the daughter-in-law would, the lady in the house would have been asked to get up from work and make tea and serve. Similarly, taking care of children, it was a job of the women and not the man. So, and some of them said that we used to get more respect when we left home for work than what we get when we are working from home. So I was quite shocked with the findings, because even I felt that, the findings would be the other way, where women would say that we enjoyed working, we could take care of our children, we could take care of families. No, they were probably frustrated by the end of 2 years, that the findings showed that many of them wanted to come to work. So while we talk about culture, this aspect of culture also, respect those women who go to work, or giving preferences to men who are working from home, and not so much to the women who are working from home. So again, coming back to all of us saying the same thing, that the society is to change if we have to empower women. And I think to change this society, I think we also need to educate men and not just women. And I fully 100% agree with Betty that if you have to ask your daughter why is she coming late, you have to ask your son also that why is he coming late. So this has to start from home.
Megha, it'd be nice to know from you is that what's happening in the business world. How is culture? How are senior management rethinking culture to make the workplaces more equitable?
So I think Puja, as I said, this topic, has suddenly in the last 2 years, specifically, if I be very specific, I think 2 years, uh, it has picked up like fire in corporates. I think every single, in fact, if I talk about India, I have never seen a COE role in HR for diversity inclusion as a hardcore role. You would see in many organizations are either open or have been filled recently in the last 2 to 3 years. I think that talks a lot around the mindset of the corporates, focusing around exclusively solving the challenges of whether it's the talent that you hire, to whether it's the skill gap, to the cultural challenges. And that's an exclusive role in the recent times that you would see has opened up as a COE, not as a additional role that yesterday an HR partner was doing or somebody else was doing, but as a full-time role that has come up. uh, US, I think it was always there. You would always find a global diversity of officer in the MNCs, but exclusively for India or exclusively for APAC is a recent norm in the last 3 to 5 years, and specifically in the last years, I've seen many organizations have started to do that, which talks about the focus that has this topic has gotten across the board. Now culturally, I would say it's a very big thing, because there are multiple things, from you know how we consciously do things and how we unconsciously do things. And I think that is a very difficult part for us to really solve for as corporates, because you can't suddenly solve for something that I've seen since my childhood. Now I don't even know, sometimes when I react, it's not because I react because I've not been educated about it, or I'm not thinking about it. It's because I've seen from last 30 years something happening around me, and sometimes my unconscious takes over me into a stressful situation or something like that. Now that's a natural phenomena, because imagine now we're talking about men who have seen in the last 40 years into a leadership role in their house or in the society. It's okay to say hey, I want to talk, or just even putting your hand like this into a meeting. How many times, as a woman, we've seen that into corporates, to say, and I can see a smile, because that shows that we all have gone through that. But is it okay, just because I'm a woman, would you stop me talking because you believe my point of view is nothing? And I believe, these are unconscious bias, because not naturally you were doing it because you want to do it, but there's so much gone culturally. And I believe corporates are doing a lot more. There is a lot of unconscious bias training. There's a lot of around knowing yourself, which is the OPQ profiling, to multiple behavioral psychological tests that has come up to assess that, how we are culturally attuned towards favoring uh, gender vis-a-vis not. I think organizations have started to put a lot more focus. One of the core values or leadership competencies now become, we have to become inclusive, in whatever we do. Like, I was talking to somebody in MasterCard, or rather Visa, to the CHRO, and she was telling me that, actually, if you think of it, coming onto a Microsoft is a lot more inclusion, because everybody is a tile out here, which means everybody is equal, in comparison to when you sit on a boardroom or a conference, somebody sits on the head of the table and talk, or stands on the table and talk, which automatically gives, a power position to that individual. But when we are on this tile, everybody is equal. We are four tiles that we're talking today. Now that's the thought that you have to start bringing in. When the person who's not talking into the room, how do you make you feel inclusive? And it's beyond gender. It's about color. It's about multiple other things that organizations start to think about. So I think there is an intent, but I still feel the rate that we are going and talking about cultural changes, the rate that we are all talking about getting the talent, training the talent, digitizing the talent, I think the speed has to be much faster into the corporate as well. Like Symbiosis is doing great job at their level, but our corporates also, you know and I sometimes feel, some of these things are also disconnected. We all need to come together and join the forces. Like Microsoft, very nicely, couple of years did a very big program with the government, which is the National Skill Development Corporation, which means they literally worked with them to, do a skill development and then probably hire them. Now that's a very collaborative way of doing that. I will ensure that there is a skill development happening in India, and then I'll probably hire, because I know that that's the right curriculum for me. How many times corporates go and tell Symbiosis to say that, these are the 10 skills that I would want for the future, whether it's Python, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's data scientist. Like the most called out skill today is the data scientist. How many times we go to college and say that, why don't you start training this? Can I offer 6 months of training program, or on the job project along with the college, that I would want people to learn, come to us, solve our project or challenges, and do that. I think that's the joint partnership we need, rather than Coursera working and thinking about skill, digital skills. Symbiosis designing their curriculum, and then corporates thinking, oh, I hire people and then another spend an year on training them because that's the skill that I want. I think we will only be able to solve when we get our hands together, whether it's the cultural challenges, whether it's the digitization, whether it's skill assessment, or even I think going back to the roots of where we belong. How do we together solve the mindset challenge that we have?
Yes, Vidya, I saw you nodding and I thought you wanted to come there. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Megha. Megha, that's not true. The companies, the industry is fully involved in the curriculum that we make. They sit on board of studies, they sit on academic council, they sit on the board of management. So it never happens that we academicians design a curriculum and just send it across and then leave it to the students to learn through, and then the corporates retraining our students. It never happens. They're very, very deeply involved, not just in teaching. A lot of people from the industry come and teach, but more importantly, even designing the curriculum. And therefore, you see, when it comes to placements, these students are already trained. And that's the way industry and academia do come together in some of the top institutions in our country. Where they don't come together, then you don't see jobs being given to students, because they spend a lot of money in retraining them. So that is what
Sorry,
I want.
Dr. Vidya, my comment was not on Symbiosis. Of course, best of the colleges do that. But today, if I put, just a percentage of how many people in the IT, which is, the technology team, pass out versus how many actually end up getting their first career, the percentage is very low. And that's primarily because not all education and academia do that. Obviously, top institutes would do that. And that's why you would see there are 100% placement for the top institutes like Symbiosis or IIT. But you would see many colleges in tier B cities, they won't do that. And probably we also know what happens, when it comes to their percentage of students who get placed or, probably get a job, which will provide them a future that they look forward.
So I'd like
Yes.
to join here as well. I think one of the things that we at Coursera can help with is connecting companies and universities. We have learning on our platform that's provided by universities, and we have learning that's provided by companies. And universities have the opportunity to insert that content into their own degrees so that students, even if they're in an institution that doesn't have access to the top learning in the world, they can through Coursera. The other thing that we're finding is that our industry partners, companies like Google, IBM, Microsoft, and others, whenever I say companies' names, I'm always afraid that I'm going to forget a really important one. So apologies if I have. But companies like that care deeply, and they're offering scholarships for people to learn so that they can take the content that's needed. Now, they're offering those scholarships to women. And many institutions are now saying, if you have that learning, that industry learning from Coursera, the industry introductory certificates that I talked about earlier, we will incorporate that into your degree program so that you don't have to take as many credits at the university. You can use this to transfer credits into your degree. That whole system where companies and universities work more closely together, trade knowledge with each other, is going to raise everyone up. And it's going to be particularly helpful for women because they can then get scholarshiped in and the cost will go down. Obviously, if you've got a scholarship, it's not as expensive. We need all kinds of things like that to help women get that first step, that first job, those first skills. And I think with universities like Symbiosis, who have the potential to do all this work, women are going to be ready. And what we need to do is ensure that they have the opportunity to show that they are ready to get that first job and to keep moving forward. That is something that the Indian government is committed to, and that I believe many Indian companies are committed to as well. And that's where the two will come together, industry and universities. Universities are responsible for making sure that women are well prepared, and I believe they have the potential to do that. And then industry is responsible for making sure that that first job is available, which will be available if people have the skills that are required.
Absolutely. So the industry, academia, and the government, all three need to work together to ensure that, there are more jobs and there is more skilling and empowering women. Betty, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the best practices you have seen in emerging countries with respect to breaking or, reducing the skill gap amidst the gender diversity?
So I feel like I've mentioned some of them already, but first off, making sure that women have access. Providing access means remote learning in many instances. It means access to cellular technology at a minimum, preferably Wi-Fi, but if Wi-Fi is not available, low data downloads so people can learn in small chunks. It also means stackable learning. Women go in and out by virtue of their lives, and they don't want to have to start over again. we need to be comfortable that as women particularly learn their skills, they're not going to forget. They don't have to do it again. Let's add it together so that over time they develop more and more senior credentials. Those are the things that some economies, some companies are really working towards. And I think those are the aspects that will make the biggest difference. The idea of flexibility in learning and flexibility in the workforce will give women opportunities. Of course, ultimately, it's up to women to take those opportunities. And they will have more confidence to take those opportunities when they see the women ahead of them who are successful.
Very valid points. Vidya, some closing thoughts from you?
I mean, I just for the sake of repetition, I think it's in skilling women, it's in educating women, it's in changing the mindset of the community, and I would say I think it's all about as families, more specifically as mothers, how do you bring up your children to believe that each and every child is equal, no matter what gender he or she is. And therefore, teaching your boys also to respect girls. It starts right from school, it starts right from home. I think when there will be a cultural change in the society, that's when true women empowerment will happen.
Megha, closing thoughts from you?
I think Betty and Vidya has said it all, but if I have to just add to that, I'll just say, standing for your own self when you feel that something is not right and something is not adding up. And second is, voicing out when you see something is not right around you, which means it's not about just self, but, we already know the challenges as women that we have seen since childhood. When we arrive at a leadership role, it's our also role to ensure that we are fair to each other, and it's not about we doing something wrong, but it's also about when we see something wrong, we need to stand up for the right thing and just stay together and help other women also be successful. I think that's the least probably we can do to stand up for ourselves and for somebody else.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Betty, Vidya, and Megha. We've had wonderful discussions. Thank you, audience, for joining us. I hope you found this session informative and you're walking away with great takeaways. I'd like to conclude by saying that culture is a slow process. As all of you said, that it takes a while for culture to change and people's mind to evolve. But as business move to the fourth industrial revolution, and we've got all this digital technology that is really helping women to feel empowered, with flexibility, with bite-sized learning, digital learning. It is bringing a lot of work at home in their comfort zone. So this is a really good time, and change is surely going to happen. With that, it's a wrap on this session. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.